So if you're watching this video right now, you're probably stressed about college applications. Don't worry, we've all been there before, and today you're in luck because I'm going to go over the entire application that I use to get into schools like UC Berkeley, USC Marshall, and many, many more. I'm also going to give my personal tips and tricks on how to optimize each part of your application and what college admission officers want to see. Now please note, I am not a college admission officer. I'm simply someone who has gone through the entire process, was able to do quite well, and now wants to help you do the same. And so without any further ado, let's begin with my high school stats. And so in high school, I had a weighted GPA of 4.19, an unweighted GPA of 3.86, and in total I took 9 APs. Now evidently, my GPA was not the strongest part of my application, and so when it comes to advice, I personally would recommend you to do the amount of AP classes or IB classes that you think that you could handle. The biggest mistake that I see a lot of people making is that they end up taking, 10, 12 AP classes and they completely overload themselves to the point that they end up having a weighted GPA of 3.7, 3.8, which granted is not the best. On top of that, they end up stressing themselves out way too much to the point that they're not able to focus on other parts of their application, such as their extracurriculars and awards. And that's personally what I think kind of happened to me. While taking 9 APs isn't the most in the world, it was more than what I could handle, and if I took something like 6 APs, I probably would have been able to get away with a much higher unweighted GPA and a higher weighted GPA as well. And this is something I've also seen in some of my friends. So some of my friends who took, somewhere around 6 to 7 AP classes and were able to have a 4.0 unweighted, end up going to Ivy League schools. And so yeah, prioritize what you could handle and prioritize having that 4.0 unweighted. Now obviously if you're a genius and you can handle 12 APs and have a 4.0, that's obviously best, but I don't think that a lot of people are geniuses, and so staying realistic with what you could handle is the best way to go about your academics. Next, let's talk about my SAT score. So I had a 1440, which was around average. Now one thing to note is that this was back when UC Berkeley was test optional. With that being said though, I do think the SAT is very important still, especially if you're applying for private schools that are going to be either test optional or test mandatory. Now what are my tips for studying for the SAT? Well, one, I recommend that you start early. One of the biggest mistakes that I made was that I really started studying like the week before. I basically just, 1 week before the actual test, I did one practice test every single day, which completely fried my entire brain, and I wish I started earlier, and so don't be like me in this sense. And secondly, I highly recommend doing as many practice questions as possible. The SAT doesn't test how smart you are. The SAT only tests how good you are at taking the SAT. And so because of that, you really just gotta put in the work. Before, that meant going and buying those gigantic SAT prep books and just doing as many questions as possible. But now we have a bunch of better tools to practice for the SAT, and the one that I personally recommend, as well as the sponsor of this video, is Acely. So Acely is essentially a platform where they have thousands and thousands of different SAT questions that are completely verified by actual people, and directly in the platform there is a chatbot that essentially tutors you. And so if you ever get a question wrong, you get a full explanation of why you got that wrong, and if you have follow-up questions, you can ask the chatbot. And this is so much better than what I had to work with, because I honestly had to guess why I got a question wrong, whereas now you use Acely to be able to get the exact answer why. On top of that, Acely is also individually tailored to your needs. So based on what your target SAT score is and what your initial diagnostic tells you, Acely will basically create an entire study plan for you. Another thing about Acely that I think is really great is that there is an entire Discord community of other Acely users, and everyone is basically just studying for the SAT. And so if you ever have any questions or you need any study tips or even just some like morale boosting, you go onto Acely to the Discord server and just ask around. Overall, I think it's just a great tool, and so if you are currently still studying for the SAT, I highly recommend that you go to the description of this video. There is a free link for you to try it out. So now that we have academics and SAT covered, I'm going to go over my entire extracurricular list. So I have the entire application right here, and I'm just going to show every single thing of it. Wow, I've never done this before, and so yeah, this is going to be very interesting, but let's just get right into it. And so the first one was this YouTube channel basically. By the point that I had graduated high school, I had around 127,000 subscribers and around 30 million views, and so I put that as number 1, which is actually, very contrary to what most people do. I think a lot of people, when they think of extracurriculars, they think of only things that are like, school related or like sports. However, it can honestly be anything, and so that's why I put this YouTube channel. Number 2, it was speed cubing, and so at the point I was ranked pretty highly. I was 33rd in the US for 6x6. Next is swimming. I was a varsity swimmer all 4 years. On top of that, I was a junior Olympic bronze medalist for my club team. Next, I was in Key Club where I was an officer. Then I had my merch brand. I had a Rubik's Cube brand as well that I had in collaboration with speakcubeshop.com. Next was something called Eco Eats, which was essentially a environmental activism organization, and I basically started doing some marketing for them. After that, robotics, I was just a member. Team Speed Shop, which was the Rubik's Cube competitive team that I was part of, but I was more so just part of it as a creator. And then finally was Modulus, which was the startup that some people in Texas had started, and then I was basically just their social media guy for a little bit. I think you could tell that from my extracurriculars, they were very unconventional. Once again, a lot of people see extracurriculars as only things that you do, at school, clubs, or only sports, or they have to be in some type of instrument or something like that. However, extracurriculars are really whatever you want them to be, and you could just be as creative as possible with them. Don't feel the need to do what everyone else is doing, and definitely just be okay with carving your own path. Next is my awards and honors, and so I had the YouTube Silver Play button because I had hit 100,000 subscribers. I was a Questbridge National College Match finalist. It was basically this scholarship program for low-income students. I was also a college prep scholar, which was basically the same program. I was a Summer Junior Olympic medalist. After that was a Winter Age Group Championship bronze medal, Varsity Letter Award for all 4 years. I was also most improved on my varsity swim team, which doesn't sound very cool, but I was proud of it. Okay, West LA Winter 2020 first place. That was a Rubik's Cube competition. The next one after that was also a Rubik's Cube competition where I got 3rd place. And then finally, it was AP Scholar with honors. Now let's just unpack all that because I know it was quite a bit. So I think it's pretty evident that a lot of my extracurriculars were quite unconventional in the sense that I didn't do a ton of, clubs and leadership positions. I didn't do, volunteer hours and all the other things that I feel like a lot of other high schoolers did. Instead, my entire application was just centered around, Rubik's Cubing and YouTube, which to be fair was what I was truly passionate about all throughout high school. And because of that, I truly believe that that was how I was able to stand out and have a relatively strong extracurricular section. With my extracurriculars, you could truly see that there was a lot of passion and a lot of genuine interest behind a lot of it, instead of just, random clubs done here and there simply for the goal of putting it on a college application. Now that being said though, you can't just take any passion of yours and put on your college application and expect them to think that is impressive. It actually needs to be impressive, and you do that through quantification. So in every single one of the extracurriculars, you could see that I quantified all of my hobbies. So, I had a YouTube channel, but how many subscribers do I have? How many views do I have? I did Rubik's Cubing, but what was my national ranking? These are the things that are going to click with your college application reader, not just, I love Rubik's Cubing or I love making videos. Those are more so things that you put on the essays, and now I can talk a little bit about those essays. Now, I'm not going to show my essays word for word on screen just because I feel like if you read them, you'll all of a sudden want to make that as an example when I don't think that that was what you should be doing. Instead, I'm just going to give you some general tips that you should have when writing your essays to give you the best possible chance of succeeding. And so tip number 1, brag. I think a lot of people go into their college applications with the, feeling that they have to be humble, they have to be down to earth, and that, their readers are going to be like, oh my gosh, they're so accomplished, but they're just being so humble. In reality, college application readers have no way of knowing how accomplished you are unless you very explicitly say it in your essays and extracurricular section. And so be okay with selling yourself. I promise you, college applications readers will not see it negatively unless you actually do seem like super cocky about it. Tip number 2 is know what level of competency your writing is. And so if you are an incredible writer, then you can start being very metaphorical with it, start putting a bunch of analogies. Now, on the contrary, if you are not good at writing like me, don't try doing that kind of stuff. I see way too many people who try saying oh, my life is like a lemon, and are just so bullish on making this weird analogy work, and they end up having no content or real substance in their essay. If you don't think you can pull off something super metaphorical like that, don't, and instead just say what you actually did. And so for me, some of my best essays are ones where I didn't overthink it. I literally just wrote exactly what I did, and I put down a bunch of different numbers and stats, and just from that, it was able to very clearly convey exactly all the things I accomplished throughout high school, and that made it way more clear. Whereas if I tried being super metaphorical with it, the reader would get lost in the metaphor, and because the metaphor isn't very good because I'm not a good writer, then the accomplishment would be lost as well. And tip number 3 is read the prompts very early. You shouldn't only be reading the prompts during your senior year of high school. If anything, if you're like a freshman in high school, just make a UC application account. All you need to do is log in with an email, and then you can just skip to the front of the application so you can see what the essay questions are. Read them very early on into high school so that you could start, thinking about it early on and start framing your experiences in ways that would fit the essay prompts. So that in a nutshell is how you get into schools like UC Berkeley and USC. That is all the advice that I have to give. If you have any specific questions, I'm going to be in the comments. I'm going to be answering anything that you have. But yeah, with that being said, thank you so much for watching. Good luck with your college applications, and I'll see you guys in the next video.